The season is mercifully over, and guess what? The Ducks did it! They lost 13 in a row to secure the best odds for Connor Bedard. They did it. They actually freaking did it. Oh, that just means they had the worst record in the league. We'll talk about that on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade. I've been the host of this podcast for the last 4 seasons. That includes a season that was cut short by COVID, when they missed the entire play-in bubble altogether. This includes a season where they were historically bad on the penalty kill and had the second worst record in the league. This included a season where there was so much hope at the beginning of the season, and it all came crashing down in the end. This also includes this season, where the Ducks were dead last. That's right. The Anaheim Ducks finished dead last this season in the standings. Even though the season is not over yet, there is still a couple of games to be determined. The Ducks clinched the worst record in the league, and therefore the best odds at landing Connor Bedard. Oh, okay. There's a lot to unpack from this game. So for this particular podcast, I'm just going to talk about this game because there was a lot to unpack from this game. And I'm just going to start with my big takeaway on this one. Anaheim sure does love taking penalties. They just cannot compete against these big guns. They're not there yet. Also, let the kids play. I mean, this is a theme that I've been saying for the past 4 years. Now we're seeing that once these kids can play, they have a lot of talent. And the game just ended, and I didn't really have a plan for this podcast. I didn't. But there's a lot of records. There was some lasts. I mentioned this on Twitter, that the Ducks now have the all-time record for most shots allowed in a season with 3,207. That's the record. The previous record was 3,080. They not only broke the record, they obliterated that record by over 100 shots. Over 100. That's how bad it was. The shots allowed per game on average was 39.1, which is also a record, surpassing the Capitals of 75. That team, which is by all accounts the worst single season in NHL history. And this Ducks season ranks up there for a team that was expected to compete, that was supposed to get somewhere around 80-something points. They just tanked. They just completely tanked. Finished the season with a baker's dozen's worth of losses. 13 losses in a row to end the season. And I mentioned this on Locked On Goals yesterday, the parallels between this. The sheer parallels between the Goals last season and the Ducks this season. The Goals last season lost 13 consecutive games to finish their season. 11 in the regular season, 2 in that playoff against the Ontario Reign. So the Goals lost 13 in a row. Joel Bouchard got Das Boot. And Dallas Eakins, 13 losses in a row. Look, Dallas Eakins has had multiple double-digit losses, and I do not want to pin this all on Dallas Eakins. I don't. But this is not the direction the team was supposed to go with Dallas Eakins. It wasn't. And now they have the worst record. You know it's bad when it gets to a point where Ducks fans everywhere are clamoring for a loss. You know it's bad when you see Ducks Twitter almost unanimously say, stop scoring, when they scored 1, 2, 3 goals. Yeah, this was almost all of Ducks Twitter. That's where we are now. That is where we are right now. Just elite tanking. I don't want to accuse any team or anyone of tanking, so I'm not going to outright say that that's exactly what happened. I'm not. However, the lineups that were put out there night after night, the lines that were put out there game after game, these are not the kind of lineups that are conducive to winning. These are not the kind of lineups that are going to lead to success. It's just not. So when I look back on this season, I look back on this not just as a team failure, but as an organizational failure. And this really coincides with what I was saying in Goals Thursday, in the last previous podcast, that it is up and down the organization, all the way from the NHL, all the way down to the ECHL. It is bad when all three of your teams are in the bottom of the standings. Tulsa, not the worst in the ECHL, but they're the worst in the Western Conference. That's still pretty bad. But to have both your NHL team and your AHL team finish in the bottom of the standings in both. And I had to do a little bit of research beforehand to make sure that this was never the case before. And just looking back on the last 20 years, it's never happened. So I'm going to go out on a limb, but say in this century, in this millennium, no NHL franchise has finished dead last, both in the NHL and their AHL affiliate. It's not happened. Hasn't happened in the 2000s. I'll have to go back and look in the 90s, but as far as I know, it's never happened. And the Ducks are the first team to do it. They're the first. So it is up and down organizationally. It's just bad. And we're going to have a lot of changes. I can already see it. I can already feel it. That there's going to be just a slew of changes up and down. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing a lot of different things tomorrow or later today when this comes out. All right. We're going to head into the first intermission and talk about the game itself. I think the game itself will take up the entirety of the next two segments because there was a lot to take away from the final game of the season. We'll get to that on the other side. But first, I want to talk to you guys about eBay Motors. For a championship team, unlike the Ducks, it is all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed, unlike Ducks. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on eBay. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, or Les Mighty Ducks. That's right. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez, and we've got a bit of breaking news. So this is going to replace what I had recorded before because I think this is worth mentioning. But I'm going to keep the first segment as is. That way I don't have to record a whole show again. But it was reported that Dallas Eakins will not be renewed. I think we all saw this coming. I certainly saw this coming. The writing was on the wall. I'd been just kind of hearing rumblings about this for the past month or so. But, Dallas Eakins was essentially a dead duck. He was a lame duck, and we knew it. And I had kind of suspected that he might be gone maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But, it is now confirmed that Dallas Eakins is out as the Ducks head coach. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a whole show about that later. So we're still going to talk about the Kings game on this episode and then come back talking about Dallas Eakins and then hopefully come back talking about the prospects because there's still a lot to get through. So, I just need to kind of collect my thoughts on that one. But Dallas Eakins is out as the coach. Yeah, we saw this coming. We really did. I'll have more about that later on. But let's just talk about the game itself. The game last night between the Kings and the Ducks was a classic Kings versus Ducks games and probably one of the best games if you're a fan of the Kings or a fan of the Ducks, because I did put out a tweet yesterday that I got a couple just funny responses for on this one where it started off with a poll. Be honest. Who are you rooting for tonight? And 76% of you said you were rooting for the LA Kings. And there were even a lot of Ducks fans at the pond last night that were openly rooting for the Kings because it meant that if we were rooting for the Kings, that meant we would have the best odds at landing Connor Bedard. So I was not torn on this one at all. I'll admit I was fully rooting for the Kings on this one because I know what it means to have a generational talent like Connor Bedard hopefully lands in your team. And to be honest, even though it's not a guarantee, it's still the best odds. You want the best odds. So yeah, I was cheering for the Kings. I was even amongst those people that were saying, okay, now stop it now. And I'll also give a shout out. I loved the sardonic posts that Felix Ricard was putting out there as far as the tank is concerned, because that's really what's best for the team right now. It is in the team's best interest to lose out, and they did that. But man, the fighting I did not expect. I did not expect much fighting at all, considering that the Kings were themselves fighting for a playoff spot. If the Kings had lost and Seattle had won, the Kings would have dropped to the wild card spot. So they had a lot riding on this game. The Ducks had a lot riding as well, but the Kings had a lot riding. And they played like it for a good chunk of the game. Maybe not the first little bit, because first goal went to my guy, Troy Terry. Troy Vetchkin scored his 23rd goal of the season. At the time, that was the team lead in goals. And then the Kings do what they always do. They took over. Anze Kopitar scored his 28th of the season. But let's go to the second period, because that was a pretty sweet goal from a bad angle. And I know some of our Ducks guys love bad angle goals. Adrian Kempe. I don't know what John Gibson did to piss Adrian Kempe off, but Kempe scored on the power play. And, stop me if you've heard this before. The Ducks allowed multiple power play goals. We've seen this happen over and over and over again. We should be used to this by now. It's game 82. We expect the Ducks to have a lot of penalties. We expect the Ducks to give up at least one power play goal. They did just that. We knew it was coming. So Kempe scored on the power play. Then Thousand Oaks native Trevor Moore scored. That was 3-1 at the end of the second period. Right around the first second, that's when we found out that Columbus won in overtime. Therefore, at that time, the Ducks had the worst record, and a loss meant they would have guaranteed the best odds at Bedard. So that would have been cool. And it was. It was kind of cool in a way, because how often do you get this kind of top-heavy draft? Not very often. And I could see it in the stands. I could see it on the Twitter feed. As soon as it was 3-1, you could see the hope in Ducks fans, especially on Twitter. They were saying, good, keep it up, keep scoring, Kings, keep going. And, I mean, they did. You know, after Max Jones scored, Adrian Kempe on the power play again. Oh, Adrian Kempe, or as a certain broadcaster would say, Kempe, oh no. Oh, I need to find that soundbite. I have it somewhere. I don't have it on me, but you know what? No, I'm going to find it right now, and I'm just going to insert it. This is going to be on the audio side, not the video side, but there's an audio clip that says, Kempe, oh no! Kempe, oh no. Just classic soundbite right there. And that soundbite was from Craig Elston, who used to be the announcer for the San Diego Gulls. This was when Kempe was still with the Ontario Reign. I'm going to play it one more time just to twist the knife a little bit. Kempe! Oh no! People on video side are going, what the hell? Oh, at the same time we were watching that second period, Chicago got a point, went to overtime. So that meant the Ducks could even get a point and they would still clinch the last spot. So things are looking very good for the tank as it was. And almost the whole crowd, Ducks fans included, cheered for that Thousand Oaks native Trevor Moore goal. And a lot of them scored, not on the 4-2 goal, but yeah, actually a lot of people did score on the 4-2 goal. A lot of people did. And then we saw Trevor Zegras try to break the tank. Trevor Zegras scored his 23rd of the season to make it, all right, yeah, 4-3. Getting a little nervous here. And then Adrian Kempe saved us all by scoring his third goal of the game, completing the hat trick. That was the final goal of the game. Ducks lose 5-3 and clinch the worst record in the league and gets the best shot at Connor Bedard. Yeah. So with the Ducks landing the best odds at Connor Bedard, how could he fit into this team? Well, there's a lot of youth coming up. There was a lot of youth that played in last night's game. So we're going to continue talking just about last night's game in general. There's a slew of young guys on this team. Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry still young-ish. You've got Bo Grew, Nestorenko, Hellison, Lacombe, McTavish, Zellweger, I hope comes up soon. Whoever is the number one or number two pick, hopefully in this draft. Be patient. Be patient, Ducks fans. Good times are coming. Don't worry. So let's talk about fights first or Kempe. I'm going to talk about Kempe first because Kempe did get the hat trick against the Ducks. Kempe likes scoring against the Ducks. Specifically, he likes scoring against John Gibson. And I put up this stat last night, and it's still to this day gets a little bit of headway just because of how hilarious it is. Between the AHL and the NHL, Adrian Kempe has now scored 17 goals on John Gibson. All right, Gibby must have pissed off Kempe somewhere, and this goes back to the AHL days. This goes back to when John Gibson was part of the San Diego Gulls and Adrian Kempe was part of the Ontario Reign. And Adrian Kempe scored a hat trick on John Gibson all the way back in 2015. So this has been just a long time brewing. 17 goals on John Gibson. The next highest team that he scored the most on is 7. So he just steps up when he sees John Gibson on the other side of the pipes. His eyes light up like crazy, and he's netted another hat trick against John Gibson. Yeah, he did it again. What can I say about Adrian Kempe? He finished the season with 41 goals. This season, the most goals by a Kings player since Luc Robitaille back in the 90s. I thought it was Wayne Gretzky, but no, Gretzky had been traded. So it is Luc Robitaille, the last King before Kempe, to score 40 in a season. Kind of a neat stat there. But, poor Gibby. Poor Gibby. And the thing is, John Gibson's going to be back next season with the Ducks because all indications from a previous press conference is that, or a previous interview, rather, is that John Gibson is not going anywhere. He's going to stick around. And Gibby tried his hardest to keep this team in it. He tried. He did get 30, I think it was 31 saves in this one. Kings shot it 36 times. Again, a lot of shots on the Ducks. They only got 24 shots off themselves. Okay, now let's talk about the fights. There were a few of them. It got pretty nasty towards the end of the game. Trevor Zegras was pissed. He was so pissed off. I don't blame him one bit. But this is a reason, and I've stated this in a previous podcast talking about future captains. This is a reason why I do not think that Trevor Zegras is captain material. He needs to learn to not lose his cool. He's done that a couple of times this season, and frankly, it's a little more than I would like. While I do like the fire from Trevor Zegras, he does have to be careful with that kind of thing because you cannot just have a short fuse and be angry all the time. And you cannot go off on the refs like that because you could later get a 10-minute misconduct for abusive officials. You don't want that to happen for a possible captain. You want your captain to be someone that can talk to the refs, that can, lobby for a penalty this way or a call going this way. That's what you really want in your captain. And Trevor Zegras, I don't think it's him. I don't. He did lead the team in points this season with 65. He also led the team in penalty minutes this season with 88. Yeah. Trevor Zegras led the team in penalty minutes with 88. That is not what you want for a future captain. So while I love the fire and I love the passion, and I was even okay with him showing his frustration and slamming his stick against the walls inside the Ponda, I was even okay with that. But he's got to learn to control it a little bit better. And it's probably not the best look for him, for Ducks fans, to see the last sight of Zegras being him just slamming his stick, getting that bad penalty against Philip Deneau, and then getting the misconduct after that. It's just not a great look. Not at all. And because of that misconduct, he picked up the team lead for PIMS for the season. Yeah, it got really bad. And then you had that whole scrap with Derek Grant jumping in there. And then you had just this really bad call. Actually, it was a good call, but it was a bad penalty to take. Sam Carrick was caught boarding Arthur Kaliev. Kaliev left the game for the Kings, didn't return. He should be back for the playoffs for those other Kings fans. But Carrick took... That was just not a good play by Sam Carrick. Just boarding Kaliev like that, just like slamming him into the glass. So Carrick himself got a board and a misconduct as well. So Carrick left as well. And then that started everything. Everybody's pairing off, everybody's fighting. You saw a lot of shoves, not really any punches thrown, but you could see some sticks like just being like, hey, like I'm going to get, like, they were really close to starting a brawl. It was right there. And the Kings backed off for two reasons. One, they wanted to be on the power play, and two, they have playoffs. Unlike the Ducks, the Kings have playoffs coming up. They do not want to fight. They don't want to lose anybody before a very important playoff run for that Kings team. And that's why I think the Ducks were shown as the aggressors in last night's game. As soon as Sam Carrick took that penalty, good on the Ducks for defending Carrick, but still not a play you want to make late in the game. So that's just my thoughts on all of that. It was a scrappy game last night. It was a vintage Kings versus Ducks game for what it's worth. Two teams going in complete opposite directions. I cannot wait till the Ducks are good again and this rivalry can just be about the hockey again and be about the hard hits and be about both sides actually competing for something instead of one team fighting for a playoff spot. Because that's really what it came down to. And then you had all those penalties at the end. It got a little ugly. And it made the Ducks look bad. It made them look bad in the grand scheme of things. And that's not really what you want to end the season. But it is what it is. And it's a lot of the Ducks players just taking their complete frustrations out. And it's the frustrations coming out from ending the season going 0 for April, pretty much. They didn't win a game in April. And being the worst team in the league. No player wants that. As competitive as players are, no one wants to be in last place. And here we are. And last night clinched it. So now we must look ahead. New coach, new draft picks. I'll have another podcast very soon talking about the new coach for the Anaheim Ducks, whoever it's going to be, and Dallas Eakins being out. So that'll come up momentarily. In the meantime, I want to thank you guys for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, ad-free on Amazon Music. Next podcast, all about Dallas Eakins. I will go into great detail about that. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at StimpyJD. Show's Twitter's at LO_Ducks. You can email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the afternoon. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.